everyone. Sorry I've been gone a while. I had a birthday trip, and then also I just haven't been feeling like making any content because the last video I made was clearly suppressed. But yeah, let's not devolve into this madness. I really wanted to talk about Russell Brand today. He's been all over the news media, as you probably already know. And yeah, the allegations are a little bit scary. So one of the big points here that people are kind of pointing out is, you know, Me Too happened years ago. The first post on social media looks like it was 2006. And then in 2017, there was a lot more traction, of course, due to Harvey Weinstein and all the allegations that came out against him. And of course, it was also reposted and tweeted and all that by a lot of celebrities, including Gwyneth Paltrow and Ashley Judd and Jennifer Lawrence and Uma Thurman. So it's, you know, why... Yeah, who knows? I mean, who knows why? I think there's a number of reasons why you would wait to report something like this. I do think there still is a lot of stigma in many different areas, and victims are often afraid to seek help for any number of reasons. I mean, retribution or publicity or whatever, but in the case against Russell Brand, it's really interesting because he's been popular and he's pretty well known, and it's really interesting to think or to ponder why the victims waited so long to come out. None of the reports were recent. Most of them were many years ago. So it's really interesting why they're just coming out all of a sudden now. Brand had also been very, very public and has been very public about his past. And, you know, it doesn't, you can take like 2 seconds to look into his history. You know, he's written a ton of different books about addiction, recovery. Apparently one of the books he goes into, yeah, this is 2007. His hairstyle was quite interesting at that point, I have to admit. But yeah, I mean, he's written quite a lot, and apparently one of the folks featured in the news was talking about how, you know, he's been really open about his past. So, you know, he kind of there's a new terminology called pre-bunk, which is, so he's pre-bunked himself against these allegations, at least in some degree. I'm not using the term correctly. So anyway.
Police, and someone who does that is definitely not interested in justice, only public sympathy.
Yeah.
I was quite shocked when I read that.
Oh, yes. Because the thing is, ultimately, what are the public supposed to do? We cannot have this man hung, drawn, and quartered. We are not a court. We are not, you know, the legal process is invested in us. If these claims, which are outrageous and they sound very serious, obviously you should go to the police. And it's not just about these victims, but it's also protecting other women as well. I hate this binary where we have that, oh, we're supposed to believe all women, women are strong and empowered, but on the other hand, you know, when you don't go to the police, you get to have it both ways, where you can have someone not convicted in a court, but you can have them convicted.
But what
in a
about
court
the
of public
argument
opinion.
that only 1% of rape cases lead to conviction?
That's more of a reason to try and improve the system. I don't.
Well, it might be more of a reason why a lot of women choose actually a different avenue
But you can't
to get
take justice into
and
your
they,
own
and they
hands.
may. I mentioned the two campaigns, Me Too and Time's Up. Of course, you know, it was down to journalists that people like Harvey Weinstein ended up in prison.
Yeah, but
they were the ones that investigated it.
This is the difference between a journalist and a lawyer or someone who works in the criminal justice system. They are looking for facts. A journalist is looking. No. I'm sorry. There have been many. Sorry, there have been many journalists who have failed at their job because they're looking for a story. They're looking for a scoop. At the end of the day, I have far more trust in the legal system, as slow and clunky as it may be, and in legal professionals than I do in a journalist that's looking for their latest.
All right, Ava. I mean, I read, you know.
Opinion has been quite fair.
Well, he died.
There. But he was never tried in a court.
And
So
I'm
should we
sorry,
say that his memory-
organizations-
But he would have been.
His
And
memory shouldn't have
organizations
been tarnished.
admitted to actually covering up his crimes. I'm sorry, there has
just-
been corroborating evidence there. The issue here is, I'm sorry, you can't make that argument. The issue here is this is an episode of he said, she said. If he's denied it and we can't do
Esther,
anything about it, what exactly are we supposed to do?
Your opinion sucks on this.
It's not about an opinion.
Believed. Instead, we should
Well,
automatically...
hang on. Well, no, again, I have a
he
problem.
is
No. Again, I have a big problem with what you just said. When you say automatically believed, right, I have a problem with that. I think all accusers who make allegations this serious, they should be listened to, taken seriously,
By the police.
and then their claims should be properly investigated by law enforcement, right? That's the only way to deal with criminal allegations. The moment you have a presumption that everyone who makes claims like this has to be believed, you end up with problems like, do you remember the fantasist who had all the politicians, right?
For every
Spacey.
For every example that you can give, there will be 100,000 women who have had a sexual assault claim that has been biffed off by the police.
That is also wrong.
I just watched a podcast with Douglas Murray and Malcolm Gladwell where they debate and they talk about how the mainstream media can really put on really just confuse you. And I found this to be true. I mean, the harder that I look into things and the more sources that I consult, and it's just like you're bombarded from 10 different angles, and it's so hard to tell what the truth is anymore. Another good podcast, of course, I'm going to include in the links down below, is with Eric Weinstein and Chris Williamson, and they really kind of talk about the same thing. It's very, very difficult to tell what is real. I mean, at this point, I mean, these allegations are extremely serious, but I mean, when do we deny somebody their due process and due rights? I mean, a lot of people are already assuming he is guilty before he's even had a fair trial. Now, I don't really have time or interest to dive much into Andrew Tate or Tucker Carlson's backstory, but apparently they said they're supporting him, which is probably true. I mean, I know Andrew Tate has some serious allegations against him, but Elon Musk, part of the reason why Elon Musk took over Twitter was to stop censorship of certain kinds. Many people actually, I think, had been banned from Twitter and now are reinstated. So, but yeah, for the whole freedom of speech issue is, in the case of Russell Brand, does he deserve to be censored? So, of course, the major issue here is that news media and governments are actually, and large private companies such as Google and YouTube, have already taken action against Russell, and he has not had due process. So the major issue with Russell Brand's situation right now is that he has already been censored and demonetized on YouTube, and there have been leaks apparently that the UK government has been requesting him to be removed from other media. Now, this is generally not the way that it works in society, and the Constitution permits and allows for due process before punishment generally. Again, it's extremely hard to know at this point what exactly happened. I mean, short of a court subpoena, I know that there's text message chains on the internet, such as the one that H3, I watched a recent H3 podcast and they were talking about it on there, and they said that, read the article, you can see he's obviously guilty, but guys, come on, what is the source there? I mean, I would like to believe these women and the allegations, but look no further than the case of Johnny Depp and Kevin Spacey. I know was accused of crimes, and Johnny is still trying to recover from the allegations that were made against him by Amber Heard in 2016. And people like Ethan Klein, I mean, I know his podcast it's entertainment, right? It's all a joke. But, Ethan is acting as if he's the judge, jury, and executioner, and assuming that, everything that you read in the media is true. And that is just not the case. And we really have to be careful because, I mean, again, there's been so many cases here of people being accused of things. And, I know that there are people who have spent like a good, decade or more in prison and behind bars because they were accused of crimes that they were found to be not guilty later once evidence and once more evidence was produced. So, and I totally agree that we should believe and support victims, but you can't sentence somebody. You can't sentence somebody without due process. Again, there's some really good podcasts again that I'm going to link below that really talk about this issue. Funnily enough, about how you really the mainstream media it's very hard to trust nowadays, and the other point is Sam Harris was talking about this with Chris Williamson as well. In a previous video I made, I found that Brand was actually diagnosed bipolar, which is of course a serious mental health condition, and I know most people don't know this, and obviously this doesn't excuse any of his behavior, but this kind of sexual promiscuity is actually very characteristic of bipolar disorder. Obviously consent is a huge part of this. That's where you cross the line into R-word territory. It makes my skin crawl. I think one of the biggest things in this whole mess is that as a mental health professional, the age of consent is in many states is still just 16 years old, and it was in the UK at one point, or still is. And a lot of the some of the allegations that came out were when Brand was with this young person and forced himself onto her, that just makes my skin crawl because it's that's an extremely young age nonetheless, and parts of your brain are not developed to consider long-term consequences or judgment, or I don't know how we can truly say that you can give consent at that age, because when I was I do remember not thinking very very hard about a lot of things, and that to me is just scary, but I guess is the law, right? And the other point, that was the point I was going to make about Sam Harris podcast with Chris Williamson, is that we need institutions, and Eric Weinstein makes this point too, is we need these institutions to protect us and to support us, right? Like we are not set up to police ourselves or build roads ourselves, right? And the justice system is not perfect, but we need it, and we need this kind of system to function for us, right? And to protect. The whole point of the justice system is to protect the public, but we still can't assume guilt just based on allegations, because then what? I mean, it's very easy to make allegations, and they're not always true, right? Now, I do have to admit that Brand's response has been a little bit spooky. He seems to be panicked, and I sort of understand. Many people might say it's possible, and I do believe that there are conspiracies, but at that point, again, you can't say that at this point. We don't know. Again, I mean, this is the whole function of a court subpoena, right? Is to, if there were actual text exchanges, then that can be found from the phone company. The phone company can put that out. But I mean, you take 10 minutes with Photoshop and you can doctor up a message chain. It's not that difficult. And I found a video on YouTube that claimed that already. Talk about either correct information or misinformation. I have no idea. I'm not pretending to know. A huge point here I wanted to make was that advertisers and private companies, YouTube is a private company and Google is a private company, and they're extremely powerful. I mean, they're probably one of the top, if not the most powerful private company in the world, right? And that's kind of scary. Private means that they can have their own terms of service. And so, on one hand here, advertisers do have, Google and YouTube make a lot of money most of their money probably is through advertising and selling products, right? And so they do have a right here to protect themselves from certain content or select who they want, to be associated with. And sadly, Brand has been demonetized. And I don't know, maybe it'll be interesting to see how things play out. Now, of course, everybody is different, right? But I do know that the likes of Donald Trump, right, were banned from Twitter at one point, and Alex Jones. And I mean, I never really watched much of Alex Jones or Donald Trump, to be fair. But at what point do we, who gets to choose? Are we going to leave it up to these private media interests to pick and choose who they want to censor? I think that's again one of the huge issues here, and several people point that out in the news media, right? I think my main point in this video is to be careful listening to the mainstream news. It's so hard, in my opinion, to understand or to get to the truth, because there's just so much information available at our fingertips now through the internet. Again, I would highly encourage you to watch the episodes with Eric Weinstein and Chris Williamson, because they really highlight this issue. Even when it comes to something as serious as this, obviously it's serious, and Russell Brand should be held accountable for his actions, but we can't execute Russell Brand before he's had his due process, just as you would want, just as I would want, just as Ethan Klein would want, just as Donald Trump should get, right? We all get the same treatment through the system that is, and the system is not perfect.